coming, and thank you especially, Eva, for being here and helping us understand more about what's going on in the world. So many acronyms floating around. What is CBDC? Could you tell us about that?
So CBDC is central bank digital currency. So it is a digital currency that is issued and controlled by one authority. It is centralized with one authority, which would be your government and or your government central bank. So it's the opposite of crypto, in that cryptocurrency is digital currency that is decentralized, meaning not one authority can control it generally, as long as there are a number of stakeholders, it's fairly decentralized. And that you can think of as kind of a freedom currency. No one can really dictate how you can use it. If a retailer accepts it, it's fine. With central bank digital currency, you have the opposite. You have, it is basically a digital prison that is disguised as money. It's not really currency, it's not really money, it's a digital prison. Because the government or the central bank that issues it writes the rules and regulations, codes the rules and regulations as to how you can spend it. So they will decide on what goods you can spend it on, whether you can spend it, whether you cannot spend it. They can set an expiration date so that if you don't spend it within, say, 30 days, it'll evaporate as useless, as worthless. So that's central bank digital currency. It's really designed to constrain the user in any way that the government would like to.
Wow. About 6 months ago you talked about this, and 4 months ago you wrote an article, and if it's anything like AI, by the time we finish this sentence, it will have changed again already. What changes have happened in the last 6 months or so?
Well, so in the last 6 months or so, what we had in the United States is FedNow came online. So FedNow is the Federal Reserve's instant payment infrastructure. It's not open to retail customers yet, like individual in the public. It's really for banks to use so far, banks and financial institutions, liquidity providers, service providers. And it's an instant payment infrastructure so that those organizations can provide to their customers instant payments. It's really the foundation or the rails onto which a CBDC can be built eventually, a digital dollar. The Fed really would need that. If they were to bring in a CBDC, they really would need a fast way to transfer payments. So they've built this. It's in its initial phases. They anticipate further phases coming online, and one of those further phases down the road can be a CBDC. However, there is hope, because Representative Tom Emmer has introduced in Congress, there's a bill in the Congress and in the House of Representatives and another bill in the Senate, I believe. He's introduced a bill called the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act, which would prevent a retail CBDC. Because the thing with central bank digital currency is, by its very nature, it constrains the user, and it provides for mass surveillance of all individuals. Because it is centralized with one authority, the central bank or your government, the central bank or your government can see every single one of your transactions that you make. And they can set up profiles, they can create profiles based on those transactions. If you engage in behavior the government doesn't like, they can turn off your money. If you post something on social media the government doesn't like, they can turn off your money. So this act would prevent that from happening. It would not prevent, I think it's written just to prevent a retail CBDC. There is such a thing called wholesale CBDCs, which is how the banks would transfer money very quickly, and that doesn't affect the retail public too much. If they want their wholesale CBDC, that's fine. I have no issue with that. Right. It's mass surveillance of every person on the planet that is really the problem.
Wow. Some people say, well, that's just a conspiracy theory, and these efforts have been around a long time. What would you say to that?
It's not a conspiracy theory. It's really happening, and it's really happening around the world. So the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, which is the central bank of all the central banks, they did a survey in 2022, and they issued their report recently this year. And their survey showed that of the 86 central banks that they surveyed, 93% are working on or have a central bank digital currency. There are central bank digital currencies in the Caribbean, in Nigeria, in China. China has its pilot going on. In India, their pilot's going on, and that's been expanded in the last few months. It's spread out to additional cities. There's more banks participating in it, which are, in India, the customer is initiated into the CBDC by the bank that they use. So the major banks in India are initiating their customers into it, and it's spreading to even more cities. In China, the CBDC is now on their WeChat platform. And recently at the Asian Games, they were encouraging customers to use the e-yuan or the digital yuan to purchase tickets for the Asian Games using the WeChat platform. So, I mean, it's happening. All the countries are developing one. It's not a theory, it's a reality at this point. The issue is, are we going to have one here in the United States? Now, the proponents want it because they say we need to keep up with the rest of the world, but it directly contravenes our U.S. Constitution and the laws that we have in this country that protect freedom. So that's a problem. So if you want more freedom for longer, I would suggest that you contact your congressional representative and your senators and support this CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act.
Are there any resources you could point us to for those among us who would like to learn more about it?
You can Google it. You might find a number of resources about it. You can go to the Federal Reserve's website for FedNow to read up on that. The Bank of International Settlements has a lot of information on there. So I guess that's what I would say. Also, I publish a Substack called Revelation 1317 CBDCwatch.substack.com. And I put out all the news that I think is relevant, both with regard to our freedoms and with regard to Bible prophecy, I write about. So that's a resource as well.
Yes.
It's Revelation 1317 CBDCwatch.substack.com.
Wonderful. We're going to hear a little bit more about Revelation in a moment here. What about this unified ledger? I've heard that, but I don't understand what it is. Could you tell us about that, Eva?
Well, the Bank of International Settlements also this year, when they issued their annual report, they released one chapter of their annual report which details their plans for a global unified ledger and tokenization of all privately held property, which means your car, your house, your bank deposits, any securities that you own, any stocks that you own or bonds that you own, would be assigned a digital token that would be coded with smart contracts and rules and regulations as to ownership of the asset, transferability of the asset, whether or not you can retain ownership of the asset, potentially. And that would be on a global unified ledger that would be controlled by the Bank of International Settlements. So this is how the World Economic Forum, they publish a slogan, it's 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. That's how they would accomplish this. Because you may own some things, but they'll be represented by a digital token on the unified global ledger that you will not control. Someone else will have control. So that's the global unified ledger.
I probably don't have to ask anyone in this room how they feel about that. I know I don't. I'm not really excited about it. I mean, I don't need the government knowing if I'm buying a bunk of Firestone ISO insulation board for a roof or a shirt at Kohl's. What's the goal of all this?
Well, I can't speak as to their intentions, but their goal is really control. Central banks like to control things. They really want to control things. They want to have their hands in things. They like to plan. They like to control. And this is a huge power grab on their part. It's a huge power grab on the part of every central bank and on the part of the Bank of International Settlements, as well as these other global forums like the World Economic Forum, these global organizations. So how could this happen? This could happen with another crisis that comes about, such as the pandemic that we just went through. some crisis where they need to bring in this CBDC right away and then steamroll any of the laws that we have in this country. That's one way they could do it.
Oh, absolutely. In 2020, people saw the huge forces aligned against them, and many of them were frightened, more frightened than they'd been in a long time. And a lot of them wanted to know how God felt about what was happening. What connections are there with this financial vice grip coming toward us and the Bible prophecy?
Well, like I say in my Substack, and like I've said before, the Bible predicted that this would happen. Revelation 13:17 specifically states that no man may buy or sell save they have the mark of the beast. Well, that anticipates that we are under such system of financial repression that one authority can control whether you buy or sell or own anything. So the Bible predicts that this will happen. We're starting to see the pieces fall into place. Now, we can try to fight it, but we know that the Bible is the truth, and the Bible is God's word. And this will happen eventually. I mean, we can push back, and I think we should push back. We should not roll over and let our rights be taken away from us or willingly give them up. We saw so many of our rights disappear after 9/11, after the pandemic. People were just happy to give up their rights. Unfortunately, when they see a crisis coming and they get scared, or they want some perceived, security, they're willing to give up their rights, unfortunately. I think we should push back. I don't think we should. No one wants to be enslaved by the global elites. I think everyone would agree with me. You don't want to be enslaved by the global elites. They don't have your best interest in heart. So I think we should push back. But I think we should also recognize that the Bible predicts that this will happen. And my bottom line message to people is build your relationship with God now. To begin to depend on God now. Really have a daily devotional, daily time with God now. Because that's going to protect you through all of this. When things seem out of control, or when they seem like they're not within your control, they're in someone else's control, you know that God has his hand in everything. And if you can have that close relationship with him and depend on him, then that'll protect you.
Amen. What are some things we could do in a practical way to kind of shore up our financial safety as we move into this era?
Well, there's a number of things that have been proposed and speculated. Like you could buy some precious metals. You could buy some gold and silver. You could have that around. You could have valuable items around that you could barter with. Now, whether that's ammunition or batteries or, something valuable, gold, peanut butter, water, something that would become valuable in a crisis situation, you can have those things that you can barter with. You can buy gold and silver. You can invest in cryptocurrency, but you have to recognize that you run the risk that any of those valuable items could be banned at any point in time. I mean, back in our history, we saw FDR banned the holding of gold and forced people to turn in their gold and their gold certificates. And so we could see that again. They could ban gold and silver. They could ban cryptocurrency. They're already cracking down on cryptocurrency and really strictly regulating it. And they're putting people in jail for selling cryptocurrency. So you can try to have these things as a means of diversification, but they're by no means guaranteed safety. So you have to run the risk that, okay, you're going to put some money here, but at some point they could, crack down on you. You just have to be ready for everything. The safest thing is to build a relationship with God and depend on him. Mm-hmm.
Grandpa used to say, buy land. They're not making any more of it.
Well, that's true, too. That's true. Real estate is very valuable. But at some point, you would have to pay taxes on that real estate. So you may have to pay those taxes in CBDC as well.
Yeah. Even that could be taken away from us, apparently.
And it could be represented by a digital token, which could also, you could lose your rights to it through that on the Global Unified Ledger. It's
evident to see that God has a big part in your life. Eva, and we're encouraged by that. What are some favorite verses that have become part of your DNA throughout your spiritual journey?
Well, I like in Ephesians 6. I can't remember the exact verses, but about putting on the armor of God. Those verses, those are very nice. I like those. Also in Isaiah, where God says he'll uphold you with his mighty hand. And also, Psalms. There's some very comforting verses in the Psalms as well.
No, absolutely.
Psalms 23,
Absolutely. So you have a Substack. You want to tell us just a little bit about that? What motivated you to get that going, and how's it going?
It's going well. I'm getting a lot of subscribers. A lot of people have signed on to it, which I appreciate. I thank all of my subscribers, and I appreciate when they comment and ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them. My Substack is at Revelation 13:17, cbdcwatch.substack.com. So I put out all the information that I think is relevant that I come across, and as well as speaking about Bible prophecy and writing about that as well, along with some encouraging Bible verses. So you're welcome to seek that out. And, I love to talk with people about this. So if subscribers want to comment and ask me questions, I'm happy to engage.
I know we all appreciate that, because most of us don't have a lot of expertise in that area. A lot of us sense that something's not quite right out there. But this begins to bring it into sharper focus, and I appreciate the work you've put into it. What else would you like to share with us, Eva? Anything of interest?
I would just say, don't be afraid. Nothing good comes from making decisions while you're in a fear state. So don't be in a fear state. Turn to God, pray to God, get your strength from God. And then once you're not in the fear state, then you can make more rational decisions. But there's no need to have fear. We don't need to have a spirit of fear, and God calls us not to have a spirit of fear. So there's no need to be afraid. God's in control. We can push back. We should push back. There's no way we should roll over for this. Mm-hmm. But, depend on God, because he's here for us.
Okay. So stand up and use the weapons of heaven rather than carnal weapons.
Absolutely.
Right? Just another word about 2020 and a follow-up question. During 2020, like you said, so many people saw their freedoms just vanish in a very short period of time. Countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Austria, they went through some very hard times in certain pockets of America as well. So did we.
In New York and New Jersey with the mandatory lockdowns that we went through. The Constitution went right out the window. That's one of the reasons why when I saw the CBDC being promoted by the central banks very quickly during the pandemic, that's what promoted me to start this Substack, because I saw its implications with respect to Bible prophecy and how it fits in so perfectly. I mean, if you wanted to control whether or not someone could buy or sell something or even own something, CBDC and the Global Unified Ledger is a perfect vehicle for that. Absolutely perfect vehicle. So it's like, to me, it is so obviously consistent with Revelation. So
would it be accurate to say that kind of woke you up, or
yes,
in the right way?
It did. Once the Constitution was thrown out the window during the pandemic, that's what woke me up. And then I trade the financial markets, so I always have my eye on the central banks. I read their monetary policy statements. I watch the interest rate movements. I watch everything that they do, and when they started moving towards CBDC, it was a huge red flag for me. It was a huge wake-up call for me, and that's what promoted me to start speaking about it. I just feel this burden to warn people. Because we've heard all our lives, Jesus is coming soon, Jesus is coming soon. Jesus is coming soon. He is coming soon, because these things are being put into place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amen. Well, thank you very, very much for the information you've given us, and we're looking forward to more. Can you give us just a snapshot of what we hope to expect in your talk later on?
Well, I think this was my talk.
Okay. So you can talk to people in the foyer.
But I'm happy to talk to everyone. And please subscribe to the Substack and comment, and I'm happy to speak to you or answer any questions that you have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that informative and heartfelt talk as well. Eva, I can tell it means something to you, and it does to the rest of us as well, because we have hope. And that hope is not in this world. There are no human solutions.
That's true.
Many of us have assumed that there were, but we've come to the place where we have to say, no human solutions.
That's true.
God can handle it.
Praise
Thank you
God.
so much for your
Thank
interview.
you. Thank you very much.